Welcome to the Astronaut Arcade Podcast, where your space hosts Andromeda, Cowboy, Ranger, and Native Raider share stories, tips, and the latest information on anything video game related. Today, we're going to be talking about not a video game, but a tabletop game, Dungeons and Dragons. Now, without further ado, let's begin the countdown to launch. Welcome back to another fun episode of the Astronaut Arcade Podcast, everybody. Thank you guys for tuning in. We do have a guest today in the form of Jackel7250, otherwise known as Russ. You guys learned all about him last week from the top to the bottom.
Yeah, too much.
How you doing today, Russ?
Man, I'm finer than a frog hair split 4 ways. It's a beautiful day. I got to sleep in a little bit. I've been prepping for, funnily enough, a D&D session.
Tonight, right?
Yeah.
And I think Fudd told me it was going to be live streamed, right?
Yeah. So they usually set up a live stream. Fudd, I don't stream or anything like that, but usually Fudd and I do stuff together, and he streams it on his channel. And
I'm not watching TV tonight.
Oh, are you gonna watch our session?
Gonna watch
it's fun. Session. Oh, I'm excited. Fudd got really excited, and he did like this huge overlay. He sent it to me last night, and I was like, dude, that is so freaking cool. I am so excited. It gets me really excited because Fudd is super excited. The players have been chatting in the chat about it, so it's gonna be fun, man.
He posted it in the Fluffy Finger My Dungeon channel over there in y'all's Discord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I thought it was really cool because I was like, oh, hey, Russ is DM. And then, oh, hey, Mrs. Fudd is playing. Mm-hmm. And hey, Fluffy is going to be there. And Eggman. Yeah. Oh, wow, I know all of these people except for one. That's cool. I'm definitely watching this.
Yeah. I'm excited about it. It's a pretty good group. We've got quite a few new players, right? Egg is new. Mrs. Fudd has played a couple of times, but this is her first full campaign. In fact, that was the reason I was a little bit late coming onto the podcast, was because I was she had sent me like, hey, here's what I'm thinking for my backstory. And I had been like, this is going to be a tangent. During our session 0, they met with this guy, right? Mystery guy. And they were like, because they had a thing they had briefly talked about, because during the session 0, I was like, you guys already know each other. Because sometimes I feel like when you're trying to bring everybody together, like it's all the new experiences and they've never met each other. Sometimes you just want to get into the game. So I was like, okay, you guys already know each other. You've been on a couple of adventures. What's the last adventure you went on? What are some things that people may know about you so that you can already start to have that relationship? And she had brought up that she has like a picture of her dad and she's looking for her dad. He's a half elf. And I was like, how old are you? And she goes, well, what do you mean? And I said, she goes, I'd be an adult. And I was like, well, okay, well, then here's the question. Did you grow up in elven society or did you grow up in human society, right? Different ideas of when they reach adulthood. And she was like, well, my mom took off with me and my dad. So we were kind of digging into her backstory. And she's like, me and my dad, when my dad took off, me and my mom, we moved back into the elves. I was like, so if you're just now reaching adulthood, like, that's like 110, 120, right, depending on the elf, but that's that, they mature a little bit slower. I said, so now the question is was it your mom or your dad who is a human or not an elf? And she was like, well, it was my dad. I was like, okay, well, if you're looking for your dad, that's weird because he should be dead. Like, he's even at 18, if you have a kid and then it's like 90 years down the road, unless he's exceptionally long-lived, he's probably dead. So I was like, so we tied it in. She goes, well, I have a picture of him. I was like, okay. So that's actually the weird thing, and why you're looking for him is because you got a letter from him that's dated recently, and he should be dead. You thought he was dead, and now you have this letter from him that says that he's not dead.
My GM brain is making him the BBEG, and
So they meet this guy, right? And I'm kind of doing a horror campaign, and so this guy has essentially like he paid them 2,000 gold just to show up to this place, and it's this It's essentially kind of like a barrow, but it's like a rest stop, and they call it the edge of the world. Right, that is the name of it. It is like the edge of the known world. Everything past this is wild land. It's just crazy. It was a kingdom that was once called Krakovar, and it's weird. So they show up at this place, and like it's in the hill, like it's built into the hill. So they go and they're sitting there, and this guy walks in, and it looks just like her dad. And so there's that kind of weird moment. There's no recognition from him that he is her father or anything like that, but you have a picture of him, and that is him. And so then everything like people are like, whoa, this is weird. He wants them to go get this iron crown from a Koshe. And they're like, well, why do you want it? And he's like, so I can rule the world. Like, this is my first step to ruling the world, and I need you guys to get this iron crown for me. And they're like,
Yeah.
time out. Like, TT, let's talk about this internally and figure this out. And then they got attacked by werewolves, and so that's where we're starting up tonight.
I'm now very excited because in my mind, if he was the human and say did she stick with the adult as far as elves are concerned? She stuck with that?
So that was what we were ironing out, because she was like, okay, I thought a little bit more about it. Here's kind of what I had thought out. And she had written about how her dad her grandfather was a baron, and her dad was like a knight out on campaign, and that's how her and her mom met. And then they had a kid, but then the baron died, and now he's the baron. And so the government's like putting pressure on him to get married and produce an heir, but he can't forget her mom. And I was like, okay, that works. Let me tweak this a little bit as a GM, right? So we can kind of bring things in. So I was like, okay, he doesn't really talk about his past. He's descended from nobility, but he doesn't want to talk about it, right? He extols the knightly virtues, but he won't say what noble house he's descended from. And it's almost like he's pushing too hard, like he's trying to redeem himself. Like, those are the stories. He's always good, he's always noble, but it was almost like he was pushing too hard to be noble, like he was making up for something. And then this group of people, this caravan of people in these brightly painted wagons and these colorful clothing gave him a letter. He read the letter, his face turned to stone, he throws it in the fire. The next morning he disappears, right? Then you heard he died on some distant battlefield. Your mom took you. You went off to go live with the elves. And just recently, once you reached adulthood, you got a letter. It had a locket with you and your mom in it. And there was a letter from him that's dated recently. And that's why you started to go and look for him. Right? And then you met your companions along the way and stuff like that. So it's just those little tweaks to kind of go, okay, here's kind of what I'm thinking. And here's how we can plan this in and kind of bring in a lot of what you had and just tweak it a little bit so it fits in with the campaign. And it's fun. I'm excited. And she was like, it's perfect. And I was like, yes, it's awesome.
That's a great feeling as a DM to just be like, all right, I got exactly what you wanted and we're ready to go.
Yeah. And so I'm planning like Elmer's, because they each sent me like private messages during our session 0 of like, here's kind of what I'm thinking with my character, or they weren't quite ready yet. And so they sent me those little things that I could be like, okay, little threads I could pull and twist to get them more heavily invested into their characters.
Well, I didn't ask you this question last week. I think I just kind of glossed over it, or maybe I just didn't see it. But do you have anything new in games for you as of recently?
I think the newest things. So I've gotten back into Star Citizen, which I don't know if you guys have listened to our podcast. But me and Fudd play Star Citizen. Occasionally we'll get back into it and we'll get super heavily into it and play it. Really fun game. It's got a lot. It's got a few things. It's still very early access. And it's obviously like the game was, I think, like they started the process like 10 years ago or more. So they've been taking their sweet time with it, and a lot of people are like, it's never going to come out, and it's a scam and things like that. So there's some stuff associated with it, but me and him, we have a great time in it. Been playing Dragon Age Veilguard, trying to push through on that and finish it up because I know Fudd is really into it and he's been wanting to talk about it. So trying to get through, enjoy that, spend some time in it, and then Marvel Rivals. I've been playing a lot of Marvel Rivals lately, and Valheim. I got back into Valheim. Those are so nothing new per se. More getting back into old games that I really
That's
enjoy.
cool. Yeah, I haven't. I've
Yeah.
been like mainline injecting Marvel Rivals at this point. Like any chance I get to sit at my computer, I play Marvel Rivals. So
It is it is really good, and especially the thing that I enjoy most about it, right? Because I enjoy getting to play a game
right.
with friends, right? Like you, Fudd,
Oh, we're friends.
Native, all these people. I think so.
I'm excited now. I feel
Hey,
loved.
you're a cool guy. I like you.
Community, if you disagree, please let him
And
know.
so, well, I mean, everybody's got opinions, just like they have armpits. They got two, and they all stink. It is a really fun game to get in with you guys and just have a night of craziness and laughter and fun. And even when you have people who get upset and angry at what's happening, it's still a good time. And I
Yeah.
just mute those people.
Dude, it was so funny earlier. Literally, so I got home from work today at like I don't know 2:15 or so. So, and
Yeah.
for those of you who don't know, we record podcast at 3 p.m. CST, and so I had about 50 minutes to get show notes together, make sure everybody was still coming in, and all that stuff. And it only took me like 10 minutes. I was like, all right, cool. I have 40 minutes to kill now. I'm going to play some Rivals. So I went over to the Space Mafia Discord, and of course, their Rivals chat is always full, and they had an open slot. So I played 2 games with them. And the first game we went in, I played as a healer, and Beef, Beef, chicken, all the things that he is.
Yeah.
He's playing Groot, and he looks up and he's like, "What is happening right now? Where is our team? Why am I not getting healed as the front line?" And he said, I think he said, "What the fuck is going on?" And I said, "You're way too fucking deep, bud." And he turned around and was like, "Oh." And then later he was like, "Well, I'm trying not to be too upset because I don't want to get yelled at again." I was like, "Dude, you only got yelled at because you started it." you
I mean, it's probably not a complaint he hears very often that he's gone too deep.
Probably not. But yeah, it was crazy. So have you played one of the spider maps where you start in the little square plaza and you have to get the thing up and around and you got to go up the stairs?
Yeah. There's like
Yep.
the door in the front, and you kind of come through all the
Yep.
buildings that are close in, and then you have to stay on the point, and then
Yep.
you're moving the payload. To starts with a T, doesn't it?
I don't know. I don't know what the map's called.
I know which one you're
So
talking
we
about.
were at the bottom of the stairs with the crawler, and he's at the top of the stairs in that secondary plaza next to the first checkpoint door, fighting the enemy team. Yeah,
Oh,
and he's like,
goodness.
"Where is everybody? What the fuck is happening? Where is my team? Where are the heals? I don't know what's going on." You don't know what's going on because you're way too far ahead of everybody, dude.
I mean, but I bet that payload was
Oh yeah, it was just
along.
trucking. And that's the funny thing is he was complaining about not having heals, but he was doing just fine by himself as Groot standing up there with his walls, and he was just like, I think he was panicking because there was like 5 or 6 people on top of his butt, and he couldn't see any teammates anywhere, and he was not getting any additional heals. So it was a fair.
I feel like Groot is a great one to be in the middle of a bunch of people, right? Because you have vanguards that are great at pushing the payload, pushing things forward, being a shield wall. Groot is one about just holding teams off, because with his walls, it is just he can funnel, he can direct the battlefield. He's a control tank, right? He controls the battlefield, and when you get a good one, it's really hard to break him open. It's really
and Beef
hard
is
to break
really
him
good at Groot. So he was holding his own, and it kind of made me laugh when he was like, "I just don't want to get yelled at again." I was like, "It wasn't serious, dude. You got all uppity, so I was trying to make sure you understood that it was kind of your fault."
This is your bad, not ours.
Beef, this is not a story to make you feel bad or to call you out or anything like that. I'm kind of calling you out, but it's in love. And I hope you know that.
But you definitely should.
As soon as this episode comes out, he's gonna like direct message me and be like, "Okay, I see how it is," and I'm not gonna know what's happening.
Beef, we love you. You are my heart, deep in my heart. You can be as deep in me as you want to be. I mean, bring it on.
But all right, so a little bit of housekeeping for you guys. Native is trying to be here today. He is having some technical difficulties. He may be able to pop back in here in a little bit if he gets that solved. And this is probably going to be a longer episode because Russ and I both love D&D, and D&D has more rabbit holes than a field full of rabbits. So
that is very true.
We're gonna try and keep mostly on track, but it's still probably going to be a longer episode. Also, Cowboy is not here again today. He is having some personal stuff. He is trying to work on himself a little bit, and he said he needed to kind of take a little bit of a step back. He might be here next week. He might not. It's totally up to how he's feeling and what's going on with him. He wanted me to tell you guys he loves you all, and he does not going away. He is planning on being back. It's just life hit him pretty hard this year. And yes, we are, at the time of recording, 18 days into the year. So it hit him really, really hard for the first 18 days of the year.
Got that sucker punch.
So if you guys feel like adding him in the general chat, just let him know you love him. We'll wait for his return. But he is not going away. So just making sure everybody knew that. He wanted to make sure you guys knew that he was dealing with personal things as to why he could not be here.
I got that song from Moana stuck in my head. Away.
That's a good movie.
That is a good movie. I don't think they need to make a live action remake of it though. I think that is
I disagree. This is actually one of the Disney live actions I am very interested to see in live action. Only if The Rock actually plays Maui.
He is, from what I understand, like full muscle suit and everything. Like he is playing Maui.
Muscle suit on The Rock.
I think but they're trying to, it looks like they're trying to make it look like it's live action, but they're trying to still capture the aesthetic. Trying to like
beef him out
from
like,
Moana.
Big. Yeah.
Right. I don't get it. First of all, it's not old enough to need a remake. Second of all, you've got the second one coming out anyway. It's not like it's a dead movie.
The character is still featured a lot.
And thirdly, it used to be a thing, right? I think, right, as we were growing up, you wanted to see a live action make of your favorite franchise, book, comic book, whatever, right? Because that's where the most money was and where you got the most production values. Now that we're in this era, I would rather see an animated version of any fantasy. They've messed up too many live actions. It's gotten too hard to capture that same feeling. Like Brandon Sanderson, I don't think his books would ever work as live action movies. They need to be animated. Because of a magic system, I think fantasy works better in that respect because you can do more, you can do cooler stuff. Not of Vox Machina, right? Look at Arcane, right? Legend of Vox Machina doesn't have a super huge budget. They still have a big budget, but not as big as Arcane, right? Arcane was like $250 million an episode. I mean, something crazy, right? But my point is I think people need to get more on board with animation. And I think that now is the time to push for animation, as instead of everybody going, oh, we need a live action remake of this. We need a live action Harry Potter. Do it animated. You could do so much cooler stuff because they're not real people. And
I think that I agree with you on that point, that animation is farther along than making TV good. Like movies specifically. TV shows are really good right now. But the reason I want Moana as a live action is because I think out of all of the Disney movies in the recent past, it is one that is most human, if that makes any sense.
Because
there's not a lot of extra magic, right? There is the one character that does magic stuff, and he really only
Yes.
transforms.
I
Yeah.
see what you're saying, but what about the moment at the end where you have Tafiti? I mean, all of that
Yeah.
can be covered, right? Especially with large production values. But what I guess my point that I'm trying to make is when you're doing these live actions, your production values are getting so high, and most of that's associated with actors. Actors are getting paid so much, and like a large portion of the overall budget is going towards actors instead of special
Yeah.
effects.
I think that can be solved with using newer actors, because if you look at the Moana team
I agree.
is not 15 big name actors. It's one big name actor,
No. Yeah, but he's probably getting 50% of the overall budget of that
possibly.
movie.
But they also lowered the budget. That also allowed them to lower the budget. Because they could have gone with, I don't know, Emma Stone. Not anymore. She's a little older.
Sure.
Um,
Also, she's not
yeah.
Polynesian, so that would be a
Well,
little,
and that's the thing.
a little
Right?
weird.
They could change two big name actors. They could use big name actors for all of these parts. Zendaya is not Polynesian, but she's a lighter
They
skin
could
tone,
probably fit within
so
that
she could
role,
fit within that range. She could have played that character. She's got great acting chops.
Sure.
She looks young enough to play a character, and she just got done filming Spider-Man, so she's big. She's big.
Yep.
But
Right.
also, she's not Polynesian, so it would take a little bit away, and it would put more into the budget. So I think having the one big
Sure.
name and doing a supporting cast of ethnically correct characters is, and he's even a supporting character. Dwayne is not. He's not the main character. He's a supporting character.
You're right. He's not the main character, but I bet he's getting paid more
Probably.
than anybody
Yes.
else on that film.
Probably. I'm not disagreeing with you on that. I just think that it out of all of the movies that have been coming out in the last, say, 15, 20 years from Disney, Moana to me seems the most human and the most realistically able to be put on screen as a live action.
Mm-hmm.
But also, that may just be wishful thinking and me not having watched Moana in like a year. So
fair. I think, yeah.
But
I agree. I think, I agree with, I think it's probably the most easily adapted to a live action.
That is where I was going. You made my thoughts sound better.
I don't think it needs to be a live action, though.
No. But out of like that versus like Wall-E being live action, you know what I'm saying? And Wall-E's not technically a Disney movie, but
Actually, I think Wall-E might be easily adapted too.
I mean, yeah, it's mostly robots, still CGI.
I mean, really, you would probably end up doing a lot of CGI, like in the same vein that The Lion King is a live action remake.
It's like 90% CGI,
which I don't get, and I don't get the new one, and I don't like it. I don't. Anyway, we're here to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, not about Disney live action.
And if you guys want to hear another hour of Russ talking about himself, I can go through the guest interview again.
Oh gosh, well, you made it sound like if you need another hour of Russ talking about himself. Look. It's not just that I like talking about myself. It's just that I talk. It's just that I talk too much about topics that I tend to have a good understanding of, and unfortunately, I have a pretty good understanding of.
We discussed that in pre-show a little bit too. Anyways,
our hour-long pre-show.
Anyways, so how experienced are you as a DM? Before I ask the question.
I mean, I have GM'd quite a bit, or DM'd, right? Depending on, it doesn't matter. GM'd, I have done it a lot. I've never completed a campaign, but that is normal. Probably, I'd say half and half.
Okay.
As a player and as a GM, and I've been playing. I was a little later to the game. I've been playing since. Let's see. I've been married for 8 years, probably 9 to 10.
So, I just realized we were talking about terms that some people may or may not know. DM or GM, Dungeon Master or Game Master, is the person who creates and writes the story and or runs the module that the players are playing. Just
And a module is typically an encapsulated adventure from Wizards of the Coast
correct.
or another source that is pre-written.
Yeah. So for those of you who didn't know that, now you're in the loop, and if you need to listen back, I don't blame you. So the question that I was originally going to ask was, how would you describe this game in a brief overview? And I know it's very hard to encapsulate all of D&D briefly.
Yeah. It is a cooperative storytelling experience.
Yeah. That is probably the easiest,
Uh,
most simplest way to put it.
Imagine a video game that you're playing cooperative with your best friends, hopefully. Friends, maybe not your best friends. They typically do become really good friends, especially if it's one that you play regularly. They typically become really good friends, or it destroys your friendship. It really goes either or. But imagine a video game, an adventure video game that you're playing with some of your best friends cooperatively, except there are no boundaries, there are no walls, there are no invisible walls that you can run into. You can investigate any interior of the world that you want to, because it's all existing within your own heads. And that sounds a little weird, but it's essentially, like I said, a cooperative storytelling experience where you and your friends are telling a story together. The GM's responsibility is to kind of guide that narrative, right? They're the hand behind the scenes, the capricious god playing with your mortal lives.
I have a t-shirt.
And you are living that experience.
T-shirt that I need to show you later. You're going to get a kick out of it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much D&D in a nutshell. It's you and some friends hanging out, telling a story, and you play most of the time a really badass character that you've created out of your mind using the framework of the game.
I don't know if I'd say most of the time. It is a character that you enjoy playing. Yeah. Sometimes that is. Sometimes, like I had a wizard once that I really loved playing, and I really want to play him again because I only got to play him for like a couple of sessions. So he was a relatively young guy. He had just recently graduated from Candlekeep, and he was a pyromaniac, first of all. So everything that he did was like explosive and had to do with fire. I talked with the DM, and he allowed me to do control flame. So I would like produce flame and then control flame, and it was like how he wrote. So in his spell book, he would just like char the pages in like a little but he thought that to be a wizard you needed to be the stereotypical, so he wore like the robes with the stars and the moons on it. He had this huge beard that he had drank in a potion to grow, and he had dyed it white, and he wore the floppy hat. So like, think he tried to look like Merlin, but the hat and the beard were constantly getting in his way, kind of like Merlin from The Sword and the Stone, the Disney movie, the animated film. Right, his beard is constantly in his way, and his hat's like flopping down and getting in his way all the time, because he felt like that was what a wizard needed to be. Like that's what they're supposed to be. He's a wizard, of course he has a beard, right? Even though, and like he would use disguise self to make him look old, even though he was a relatively young guy. So like he couldn't grow the beard on his own, so he drank the potion. He didn't look old, so he like tried to make himself look old, and like, so it was really fun. I would not consider him badass. I would consider him very fun to play, though.
And for me, in my experience with the game, the reason I say most of the time badass is because when I was introduced to the game, and for pretty much every game I've played or DM since, everybody has that hero fantasy. Those are the games I played.
I'm big on
those are the games
fantasy.
I played. So when you're trying to portray a character as a hero, normally you don't start out being end all be all. You kind of start out being a little bit of a doofus, but the goal is hero and heroic deeds. So like your character turns into a badass at some point.
I think that also depends on your alignment, right? Because you can be, may not necessarily be heroic deeds that you're doing all the time. But I do like the character I'm playing now in FUD, where he's GMing, right? his name is Perxirus. He's a Goliath barbarian, and he has the giant blood subclass. One of the most fun characters I've ever played mechanically, because just being able to pick people up and throw them as a weapon, or to turn into a giant, like, it is the Hulk fantasy that I've always wanted.
Yeah, I've enjoyed the few sessions I've gotten to catch of that. I don't go back and listen to them. I don't know why. I don't like listening to it. I enjoy watching it.
Sure.
And
yeah,
I'm not sure how many of those episodes are actually still on Fudd's channel, but like I also enjoy watching it.
He has them all on
okay,
YouTube.
Cool. I can go to YouTube now.
YouTube. Yeah.
I'm not watching TV for the next week. I hope you understand now. Minimum.
Dude, the dragon piss one was one of my favorite. Did you catch that one?
I caught the first and the second episode.
Oh my gosh.
And part of the last
I think this
one.
was the third. This was the third. Sweaty Spooks, one of the people in the community, he's playing a rogue, and I don't know where he got the idea, but his whole goal that session was to get a barrel of dragon piss and to use that barrel of dragon piss was the entire goal that he had throughout that episode. So we had just killed a dragon, right? We're harvesting it for parts. He wanted to cut open the bladder and collect the dragon.
That was the episode I caught a little bit of the beginning of. So I was there when you started eviscerating the dragon.
Oh my gosh. So funny, because the whole thing... So we finally get down, we end up in this encounter, and he is like... So he's talking to Fudd, and he's like, okay, I've got this barrel of dragon piss. Like, what can it do? And Fudd's like, I don't know. We'll figure out something cool. So he chucks it at these people, and it explodes over them, and Fudd's like, it's mildly acidic, and like starts to burn them. And I think what Sweaty wanted to do was to like light it on fire like it was gasoline. But that didn't quite work. But it was funny because it was just the entire episode was Sweaty just trying to kill somebody with dragon piss. That was his entire goal that episode, and it kind of worked. Is the moral to that story. But it was so funny that he was just like, his entire goal was like, I just want the dragon piss. I just want to use it. I want to use it to kill somebody.
Honestly, that story is a perfect example of Dungeons and Dragons. It's the perfect example of overarching game theory with the game is you're telling the story and you have a errant screw loose that day. So you want to do something crazy and outlandish. You can do that crazy and outlandish thing. Right. It might not have the desired results, but you can do it.
Right.
So this is a little bit of a tricky to answer question. There's a couple of them that are tricky to answer, but I left them there on purpose. What would you say is the main objective? Because I have a simple answer, but
I think there are two. And I think it's dependent on which side of the table you're on. As a player, have fun, right? That is the main objective to the game, is to have as much fun as possible. And there's a lot that goes into that, right? Because you don't want to take away from other people's fun, right? And that's part of being that cooperative experience and relying on other people to let them tell their story as well. Because there is that piece to that, right? It's a social game. And, sometimes... Because I think this was one of the things I ran into when I first came in. I love Batman. I like edgelord characters. I like dark, gritty, grimdark fantasy, right? Down and dirty. My first character was not a friendly person. He did not play well with others. And I liked the character. I think he had some places to go. I think he had opportunities to grow. But I think for the people that I was playing with, he was not the right character to play. And I didn't allow myself to fit in with the group as that first character. Eventually, I just had to be like, I'm switching characters because nobody liked him. And I was like, totally understandable. He's a dick. Let's bring in somebody else. Let's make something that's a little more, I can come in, I can be... and I can just change the character around without having to rewrite the story that we had created together. As a GM, though, as a GM, I think the main objective is to allow your players to tell a good story.
You took my answers right out of my mouth. That is absolutely what I would say is the main objective. As far as with video games, right? Most of the time there is some kind of main objective. Like in Marvel Rivals, for example, it can be kind of hard to see the objective, but the objective is to hit the top tier of ranked and to find all of these different story pieces to fill out your comic logs, right?
Yeah.
That is a main objective. You can hit that goal and you can end the game, so to speak. So
Right.
with Dungeons and Dragons, there is never really an end. I don't know if you've heard the story, Russ, but there was a group of players who played the exact same game of Dungeons and Dragons for 20 years.
I think I've heard varying stories of,
but like they played
things,
they played once a month because they all lived in separate states,
Mm-hmm.
and once a month they would drive and conglomerate at a house, and they would spend an entire weekend just playing this game, and that's how they kept in touch with each other. That's how they figured out what was going on in each other's lives. They broke bread, had meals at the table, drank copious amounts of beer, and just played this game to just hang out with their friends. And it was fun.
Yeah.
And that's the main objective, is to just have fun. And as a DM or a GM or however, I think you're absolutely correct with allowing your players to tell a good story, because a lot of people will answer that question from a DM's perspective. The main objective is to tell a good story. I've heard that more than anything. But I think you're absolutely correct with allowing your players to tell a good story.
And let me tweak it a little bit, because as I thought about it, I realized it was actually to help your players tell their story, right? Because like you said, everybody, like especially the hero fantasy, right? They have an idea that they want to play in. And like earlier when I was talking about my interactions with Mrs. Fudd, right? We tweaked a little bit of her backstory to kind of get it to flow into what I can use and kind of what I've set up, right? But it's still her story, because I said, hey, let me know if this works. If it doesn't work, we can change things up and we can go a different direction. But here's how I can see how this can flow into the story, and we can tell a really good story together, right? But it was her choice, because it has to be their choice.
Yeah.
Right, on the story that they're telling, because then they're going to be involved and they're going to want to be there.
Exactly. And GMing is hard to keep that balance, especially.
It is.
So it sounds, logical, the way that you just put it. Very logical. Like, I want you to have the best possible story you have. The problems come in when you have 6 different stories to tell. And that is the challenge of the DM, is you want your players to be able to tell their story and have fun doing it. But you also have 5 other people outside of that one player to tell that story for, and to make all of these stories mesh and weave into each other. And Matt Mercer, the DM for Critical Role, that guy, on top of, like, if just excluding the world building that he can do, because his brain for world building is next level. If you exclude that altogether, say he was just running modules, which I don't think he's run modules, but he has run single one shots for celebrities and other D&D big shots and things like that.
Right.
He still has the capability of, no matter what table he's sitting at, to allow his players to tell their story and interweave them in a way that somebody who has never met, say you and me are playing with him and we had never met before, you are going to be in love with my character by the end of that. And if my character dies, it will break you, like, as a person, like as a IRL person, not just your player character, but as you as a person will become attached. He interweaves those stories together so well, and it's crazy.
I think there's a trust, right? Especially at their table, there's a trust that they have, right? And part of it's because they've been playing together for years and things like that. But there's a trust of, we know when to let go and let Matt kind of do his thing, and he knows when to let them do their thing too. You know what I mean? Which is a hard thing. And like you said, right, there's an easy answer there, but that answer can be done in so many different ways, that it's I mean it's really, and I mean like I really love Critical Role. I think they are the type of game
Yeah.
that I like to play, right? I like to do a lot of role play. I like to bring that narrative experience in. Other people that I've played with, the group that I play with in person here in San Antonio, they're very driven by the strategic
Yeah.
combats, right? They like to play it kind of like a miniature game, and that's fine, right? That's a perfectly acceptable way to play Dungeons and Dragons too, right? But it's there was a point I was trying to make here, and it was that in pursuit of that right,
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to tell a story together. You're trying to uh as a GM, you're trying to let them tell their story, and as players, your goal is to have fun, your objective. There are many ways to pursue that, and each person
Yeah.
is a little bit different. That was the point that I was trying to make, I think.
No, and that totally makes sense. Each person. So I have a story to share about my personal experience
Mhm.
at a table where we started out as just a small group of random people at a game shop that was hosting
Mhm.
D&D nights. You show up, you get on a
Right.
table, and see what happens. We carried that game on for a year and a half, and eventually moved out of the game shop into our houses to be able to play this game.
That's awesome.
And
Yeah.
there were people who didn't mesh well, and that happens. So those people
Sure.
did not make it to the house stage.
Does. Yeah.
They made it to that
Right.
that first table, and when we moved a game to the house,
Right.
those people were dropped off, and the game continued.
Their invites were
Yeah,
lost in the mail.
but they were not, and this I want to be clear about. They were not playing the game wrong. They just did not mesh
Mhm.
well with the group that we had that stuck around. So for me
Right.
personally, I have the hero fantasy, and I play my characters
Mhm.
to their backstory and to their flaws and to their goals. And I really like the role play like you do. So
Mhm.
I would make decisions based on how my character would make those decisions, not based on my personal interest. But
Right.
some of the people that didn't stick around didn't mesh well with that, and they would
Sure.
want the best gear for their character. And
Oh, yeah.
like
Yeah.
they would try and make you as a person feel bad if your character got good drops and their character got nothing. And
Sure.
that wasn't the kind of environment we were trying to grow as a table.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's part of the reason that person was not invited to the house games, is because we want to play a game where everybody is allowed to have good things. And I think a good way to play that is a good way to say that, however, is to say he also had the hero fantasy, but he also had the power hero fantasy. I want to be the number
Sure.
one.
You get
Yeah.
min
I want
maxers.
to be the
Yeah.
number one most powerful person in the game.
He had the main
Yes.
character syndrome.
Yes.
Yeah.
And our DM was good about making sure that anytime good drops were had, and this evolved over time, obviously, but when we started to realize what his deal was, our DM was really good about making sure his character got something out of every encounter. It might not
Mhm.
have been the most broken thing off rip, but it
Oh,
was
sure.
something that if you thought about it and you used it, cynically, it could be
Mhm.
that end all be all item. And he would put us in situations to where this
Right.
player could use those items. Now, this player
Sure.
had these goals, but he didn't have and this is going to sound really mean, but it's very true sometimes. He didn't have the mental forethought and capacity to think of
Sure.
unique interactions with his items. So he would get frustrated very easily and say like, "Oh, he got this thing that upped his stats like this, and now he's doing all of this, and I just got this lame whatever." And in the back of my mind, I'm sitting there thinking, "Yeah, but in this particular situation that we are currently in, that thing that you have can be used in this way, which is not how it is written on the card, but you can use it like that, and it now becomes broken."
I have a couple of stories, so let me know when you're done with
I
yours.
mean, that's pretty much it. And it, the whole point I was trying to get to is we're talking about main objective having fun. That player drained the fun for everybody else at the table because
Sure.
he was too focused on himself instead of being
Right.
group focused, which is one thing I think D&D every table is going to have ups and downs of people who are more willing to give and people who are more willing to take. Having the balance of
Yeah.
give and take amongst everybody I think makes for a great, fun environment for a table to form.
And I think you're absolutely right. I think, and I know for me at first it was an adjustment, right? I had always wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons. I'd never had the opportunity. I finally had the opportunity, but I had that main character syndrome where I wanted to be the main character, and I was like, oh wait, whoa. I had to back off of that, right? It wasn't fun for me. It wasn't fun for the people I was playing with. None of that was fun, right? And so it's, but you can also learn from that and go, you know what? Maybe this isn't the way I want to play this game. Maybe because then once I let that idea go, it was like, no, it's more fun to be that group, and even like I want to help this person get this and do this thing. Like I so the one story is Broken Gear. I rolled, I don't know why my GM decided to give this to me. I remember rolling really well. I was looking for an item, and really, I was playing a rogue, and I was looking for something that would boost my dexterity, right? Because again, it was in pursuit of that main character syndrome. I ended up getting this piece of armor that gave me like a +2 to dex. Just a straight up +2.
Insane.
Straight up +2. Yeah. No, it was dumb. I ended up with a 22 dex. It was so broken. So broken. It was ridiculous how broken it made the game. My attacks were crazy. And then he gave me this gauntlet that, like, because I was playing an assassin, if I got a crit, it like quadrupled the damage, but it did like damage to me. And it was like, because it was his first time GMing. It was our first time playing, and so there was still that kind of figuring out, okay, that's way broken. Like, the gauntlet had, like, major defects. Like, I had to kill a person a day, and I had to, like, do all this crazy stuff. But it would do, like, if I got a crit, it would do crazy amounts of damage. It was nasty. So, and you can begin to see then why I was like, maybe I need to retire this character and bring in another one. Because at this point, there's really no.
On top of the fact that he's already super overpowered, broken, and nobody likes him at the table because he's an asshole.
Yeah.
It just kind of makes the game feel bad.
Yeah.
Yes.
The point of that story is, even if you have that, you can learn and grow into this game and have more fun, right? That's kind of what I'm getting at there. The second story is crazy creative use of specifically a spell. Most creative use I've ever seen at a table. Sweaty Spooks. Did you watch this episode? Still one of the best moments. Okay, still one of the best moments. We come across this mound that looks like a dragon. We're hunting a dragon. And we're all trying to figure out, like, this is weird. We want to figure this thing out. And we want to, like, is it alive? Is it dead? Was it alive? Whatever. Sweaty Spooks has a spell called Fairy Fire, which only works on a living creature. He cast Fairy Fire on it because we were trying to figure out if it's alive and maybe it's just petrified or whatever. He cast it on it, and we were able to know definitively that this was not a living creature. Such a cool use of a spell that you would not typically associate with the use of that spell.
I think the most out of the box I've seen, it was like a cantrip even. I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was control water. No, it was create and destroy water. That's what it was.
Okay.
Somebody said, okay, so I can cast this once every 6 seconds for turns' sake, right? The DM said, yes, correct.
Right.
Okay. We know, based on what we've been told, this is a mine. It has no exit. We are currently sitting at the exit. DM says, yes, that is correct. Okay. This spell, because if I remember correctly, create and destroy water is a cantrip, right?
5 cubic feet.
5 cubic feet in a cantrip. It's meant to put out small fires or make drinking water for your team or something simple, right?
Right.
He said, okay, however long it takes for these goblins inside of this thing to get from where they are to out, until said time, I'm going to create water in a 5 cubic feet space into this tunnel indefinitely, every 6 seconds. So at first, it was like, okay. And then the DM did the math. Well, let's say you do that for a minute. so 60 seconds. So you cast a spell 10 times. And so you have now created 50 cubic feet of water into this tunnel. At
Mm-hmm.
first, for the first minute, that's not a lot. 50 cubic feet of water is not a small amount, but it's not a lot. But he has basically created a
Right.
stream now going into this tunnel in 1 minute. Within the
Mm-hmm.
second minute, he has created a river. Within the third minute, he has created a deluge down into this tunnel. And the DM basically said, okay, so I guess after 5 minutes, you have effectively drowned all of the goblins because you have filled this tunnel with water.
Right.
How are you guys going to go down there and collect these parts and like find the thing you're looking for? Oh, well, now as we walk down, I'm going to start destroying water all the way down into it. And I was like, that is so creative that you just completely erased an encounter or potentially a string of encounters.
Mm-hmm.
And now we can just walk in and
Mm-hmm.
collect our loot.
Right. Well, and as a GM, you probably could have found a way to be like, oh, okay, well, obviously the goblins are going to go, oh, there's water coming from somewhere, and let's go and investigate, right? But there's also that rule of cool, where it's like, you're telling a story together, and it's like, you know what? That is a clever use of this. That's cool. I'm going to let it happen. Like, you guys were going to fight some goblins. Now you've just killed all the goblins. So good job.
And I think the DM used the reasoning of like, okay, well, this is actually a really deep tunnel. This was meant to be a prolonged experience of going down here, interacting with things, and trying to figure out. So he reasoned it for himself. Yeah, that makes sense. That it would take them a while to notice the water, and by the time that they noticed it and realized that they needed to investigate it because it was coming in quicker, it would have been too late.
Yeah. I mean, like it's one of those things where it's like, you know, like I said, as a GM, you have a decision to make of like, and that's why it's like helping the characters tell their stories, because it's a badass moment, and letting your characters have a badass moment, I think makes for a better GM, right? It's that yes and, right? Instead of saying no but, if you can say yes and.
And that being said, there are also circumstances where it's like, okay, you're stretching a little bit, so maybe like back off a little bit on what you're trying to do. I like the idea. I love what you're trying to do. It's probably not going to have the desired effect that you're looking for.
Well, and two, it's like, is that going to take away from the fun that other people are having at the table? Right? Like, yeah. That's it. The end.
So this question is mildly redundant. Is there a story to this game?
I think it depends on how you play. Because, like I said, there is usually an overarching story. Some players feel more or less invested in the actual story. Some people just like to do combat. Some people just like to do interesting encounters. Some people like puzzles. Some people like, you know, whatever. For me, as a storyteller, as an aspiring author, I like the story more, which is typically why I'm like, yeah, I'll GM, right? Because I have an idea of like, oh, okay, you know, this could happen, and I like that improvisational piece, and I like doing that. So for me, story is paramount.
Yeah.
For me. I don't think that's true of everybody, but for me, I love a good story. That's why I like the role playing. I like characters to interact with each other. I like them. I love, as a GM, right? I love when I drop something. So, again, right, going back to our session 0 for the campaign that I'm running for FUD and those guys, there was that moment where I didn't plan. Honestly, I didn't plan for this guy to show up and look exactly like Eleonora, right? Mrs. Fudd's character. But when I was talking about this guy coming in, they go, does it look like her dad? And I was like, I did that quick mental math in my head, and I went, yes, he does. He looks exactly like it. Because I thought that was a great little piece, right? Because it's that cooperative storytelling experience, right? They are starting to tell their own story because they were all like, does it look like her dad? Does it? Does it? Like, let's look at the picture. And I was like, hell yeah, it does. Hell yes. Right? And then I kind of figured out, okay, this is how that could work and why it would work and things like that. But I love those moments. And like the moment, like, so they're talking with the guy and they're like, so he gives us the bag of gold and he drops it into their hand and they're like, what does the gold look like? And I'm like, well, The gold is like it has this reddish tint to it. And like when you taste it, it tastes a little more like iron. Ben's like gold, but it tastes a little more
Blood
like
gold.
iron. And seeing them go, doing that quick mental math of like, oh my gosh, what the hell am I holding onto here? Like, what is going on
Quite
in this
literally
place?
blood money.
Yeah, I love that. Is one of the most thrilling pieces to me is when we're telling the story and you can see the players getting invested in it. And like the moment like where he's like, yeah, I want to take over the world. And then Fudd's character is like, whoa, 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 whoa. Because it's really funny because he was planning on playing a character that's like yes to everything, just trust people explicitly all the time. And then he was like, he like saw, because everybody was like, we have a lot of new players, and most of them were like, okay, I mean, like, sure. And he was like, not, this is not a good guy. This is not a good guy. We need to figure this out. So they walk outside, and they're like, it's starting to get night, and so like then I'm starting to drop hints. Like I'm like, okay, you're at this place that's on the edge of the wilds. It's starting to get dark. You're in this place that is obviously very, very heavily fortified. It's in a hill, right? They built it into a hill. And so, like, I'm like, all right. So you see this cloaked rider coming in, and he's whipping his horse. His horse is galloping like crazy. And he, like, jumps off of his horse, throws it in the stable, jumps off his horse, runs into the inn, and, like, slams the door shut, right? Because the night's starting to fall. And, like, and you can see a couple of characters kind of going, and then I'm like, okay, and one of them's a ranger, Fudd's a ranger. I'm like, and he's like kind of scanning out, and I'm like, there's this deep dark forest, like you're right at the edge of the forest. It's maybe a mile off, it's like 50 feet, 60 feet. Anyway, it's close enough that you can see, but not close enough to where you feel in danger of being engulfed by it, right? And he like sees eyes. And he sees kind of this ape-like beast kind of come and peer down and then like fade back into the shadows. And he's like, guys, I don't think we want to be here.
At night.
And then Fluffy's like, I have prestidigitation. I was like, yeah, you do. He goes, so could I shoot like fireworks into the air? And I was like, yeah, you absolutely could. And so he like shoots fireworks off into the air. And Bud is like, no. So he shoots the fireworks off into the air, and then you just see everything go quiet, right? And then you hear howls off in the distance, and then you see these loping furry figures just come tearing out of the forest, and they're like, "We gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go." Right? It's all in. For me, those are like exciting. I get excited. You can tell. I get excited about it. I get excited about telling that story. And what makes it even better is it's something that we're telling together, right? None of that is anything that I had planned. I knew they were going to show up at the edge of the world. I knew they were going to run into this guy. I knew bits and pieces of what was going to happen. But it's all a story that we were telling together. I didn't know they were going to go outside. I didn't know that they were going to be like, nope, we are absolutely not getting you this crown because that is a terrible idea. That is the worst idea that we could ever do. Do not do that thing. That is bad.
I mean, they also could have gone the other way and been like,
so,
yeah, we can do that, but also you have to name us your loyal, like, retainers.
Oh, and he said that. He was like, oh, absolutely. You guys, I will give you everything that you could ever desire. You will be my generals. You will be my right-hand men. I will give you power and authority, and we will rule this world together.
That's to me, that to my player brain, I'm like, that's too far. He's gonna kill us.
Well, and I mean that's I think that's partly why Fudd was like, nope, we're out of here. Like this is getting very, very weird, very, very quickly. And Fudd knows how I operate, right? Because in the last campaign, he was being chased by an Oni that would take him and torture him. And like, because he was gone for a couple of sessions. So the Oni had taken him hostage, replaced him with a doppelganger. So, and he was actually playing this. So I was like, all right. So we had this encounter, and I was like, okay, here's the deal. Roll me this, roll me that, so I could determine whether it happened. I was like, all right, you're replaced by a doppelganger. At a certain point, you are going to have to turn on your friends. I'll tell you when that is. Up until then, you're playing your character as is. But at a certain point, you're going to have to turn on your friends. He was like, okay. So we played through that. And then the entire time he had been like, the Oni would like pop out his eyes and then cast regeneration on him. So he'd grow him back. So it would just torture him night after night, day after day. So he'd have these nightmares about this Oni. So Fudd knows how I usually GM, which is
Dark and twisted.
Grimdark. Yeah. I like it when somebody goes, "You are really messed up, man." Like that's a compliment to me. I'm like, "Yeah, man, I really am. Welcome to my brain." Anyway, the point is story. Story to me is paramount, and that includes making, as a GM, that includes bringing your players in so that they're telling the story with you, and also making them feel heroic and cool. And whether it's cool in failure or cool in success, right?
Yep. I have nothing to add to any of that. That's exact. No. Like
Sorry.
you don't have to apologize. I think you covered it in your first sentence, and the explanation I think made it easier for people who have never played before to understand. Because there is a story,
I hope so.
like in general, just generic. There is usually a story. Whether the players decide to play that story or not is up to them, which can make or break whether or not there is a solidified story. So, yes and no, and your explanation covered the yes, and your explanation also covered the no. So,
I think it's important, right? And again, this is speaking specifically as a GM. As a player, it may or may not be important.
Yeah.
Right. You may or may not be invested in the hooks that your GM is laying out, or you may have a GM that's not, like, that isn't as important to them. And maybe it's just about what you're doing together at the table. But there's always still stories that can be told. For instance, another story.
I told them it was going to be a long episode. I put the asterisk in verbally.
So this is one of my favorite moments that's happened at the table. We, as players, we are investigating the disappearance of these horses. We come into this field, we see like a divot in the ground. We see it was like a deer or something walked across and then it disappeared. See these claws come up, disappears. So we're investigating it. We're like, this is weird. Like there's the divot. So one by one, we end up stepping on this divot in the ground and disappearing, getting grabbed by these claws, taken underground. And then he paused and let each of us then decide what we were going to do and how we were going to do it, and blah, 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 blah. Come to find out it's an Umber Hulk. We're like level 2
that's
or 3.
a hard fight. Yeah.
Right? Oh, yeah.
Doable, but it's very challenging.
So what ends up happening, because all of us get stunned, every single one of us, we're screwed. What ends up happening is he's about to go and eat one of the guys. The only thing that I can think of and the only thing that I have is a filter of love potion. So my attempt is I'm going to toss it to the guy that's getting eaten. He's going to take it. He's going to force feed it to the Umber Hulk, and then maybe we'll get out of this. My throw misses, but the GM then has me roll some other stuff. I roll really high. It lands in the Umber Hulk's mouth. The Umber Hulk now has a filter of love. He only cares about me. The rest are able to escape. I'm a rogue, and I'm like, I'm just going to have to book it, right? Action, bonus action, movement. I am just booking it out of there. I climb up a tree. The Umber Hulk is still circling, and the Umber Hulk then followed us. Later on in the game, towards the end of the campaign, we're fighting the BBEG. The Umber Hulk shows up.
Disclaimer, BBEG is another term. Big, bad, evil guy.
Yeah. Umber Hulk shows up to help us in the fight. Right? Just crazy off the wall. There's always a story to be told, whether it's the overall story of what's going on or just a story that you're creating with your friends at the table. Right? Cool thing that happens during combat. That's the end. That was what I was getting at. It may not be the overall story of the campaign, but it's stories that you can create together.
100%. Music.
Yes.
I think, so normally the question is, what's the music like? The music is never the same at any table. Like, you may have similar songs that play through the playlist, but it's never
Yep.
identical playlists for every person, whoever is
Mhm.
GMing. So I've seen good musical choices. I've seen bad musical choices. It happens. I am partial to using thematic music. If somebody gets into a tense situation,
Mhm.
the music becomes tense. If they walk into a creepy forest at nighttime, the music is mysterious and creepy. Like that is
Yeah.
what I like to use. And then for combat music, I used to have a list, I don't think I have it anymore, of video game combat music.
Nice.
Layered in
Yeah.
from minor encounter background video game music all the way up to Skyrim, a dragon has just found you music.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it had a large range, and I don't think I have that list anymore, which is a little sad. But I also don't get to play anymore, so it's been quite a few years since I've actually got to play Dungeons and Dragons. But yeah,
Is
I,
it
I I
really?
think I'm going
Ooh, we
on.
need to change that.
I think I'm going on 3 years since my last game.
We
Yes, we
need to
do.
fix that. We need to
Yes, we
fix
do.
that, Ranger. Um, for me, for music, I usually I use YouTube, man, because YouTube has a bunch of stuff that people have already created that is just playlists, so I don't have to
Hmm.
actively be like, oh, let me go in and change this and do this. And typically, actually, what I do is I will have some songs, like a genre of songs that just kind of like play through, like, they're in the middle of a desert. I try to find something that's a little more thematic
Yeah.
for that. But what I also like to do is like the atmosphere
Hmm.
sounds. So I'll kind of do the atmosphere sounds on top and then kind of put the music kind
Mm,
of coming in a little
okay.
bit lower so that it kind of helps to draw people in. However, I have played with people that it just distracts them, it
Yeah.
gets them out of it. They can't really get into it. So I go either way, but that's typically what I like to do
What?
is if I had
Yeah.
my druthers, is YouTube going so that I have my the music going, and then battle. I have battle music that I'll swap it to a playlist of battle music that'll just go through because usually I find in combat most people aren't paying attention. It's just the extra excitement to
Yeah.
keep people on edge and keep people pushing.
Yeah. And when you were talking about the layering the sound, right? So you have your ambient sounds, and then your music in the back.
Yep, ambience. That's what I was looking
Uh,
for. That's what I was looking
I'm the easiest depiction for me verbally that I can verbally say is if you think of a older themed, like very old for 2025, but an old
for. Yeah.
Egyptian themed bazaar or a Mediterranean
Mm-hmm.
bazaar, I guess is probably a better way to put it. You
Yep.
have everybody is talking, conversing, haggling, doing all this and this stuff, which is your ambient sounds in the front. This is what you hear all
Mm-hmm.
around you. Depending on what part of the bazaar you're in, it is deafening or it is soft.
Mm-hmm.
Behind that,
Right.
you have off in the distance a small band playing on a street corner. And you have this, you know, Mediterranean jaunty tune that is just in the
Yeah.
background. And
Exactly.
it's like it's way in the background and
Yeah.
it's only there to set the vibe. But then your
Mm-hmm.
ambience is like, okay, this is where we are. And that's
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm picturing when you're talking about the layering. And that's what I like to do. That's exactly what I like to
Exactly.
do. I try to find,
Yeah.
and that's why I made my own playlist, is because I would go and I would find
Mm-hmm.
exactly what I wanted for situation. And I did it as part of my prep work.
Yeah.
So like there was at one point in time I
Mm-hmm.
stopped doing it because it was a lot and I stopped having time to prep for
Mm-hmm.
3 hours before a session. But I would go through and be like, okay, my players are going here. We've already discussed this is exactly where they're going. I know what this section of the map is. I know what it is themed
Mm-hmm.
around. I know what the ambient sounds. I don't know why I keep doing that. Ambient sounds. Um, but I find those ambient sounds and then I find the music that I think would, the creepy or the mysterious or whatever would fit
Right.
behind it. So one of my favorite
Mm-hmm.
depictions I ever did personally as a GM was they were walking through a forest that is known for people just disappearing in. Nobody knows where they go.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in the forest at night, one or two people may come back, but it's because what they said is they see this dense fog roll into the forest just after
Mm-hmm.
night. Not dusk, when night has fully set, they see a low fog roll in that just gets thicker, thicker, to the point that you just can't see through it, and it's almost a wall. There are little trickles coming off from it, but it's mostly a wall right in front of you in this forest. People who come back talk about it. Nobody knows what's inside because anybody who's gone inside has not returned. Their objective is on the other side of that wall. They need to figure out how to get through it and make it back alive.
Yeah.
I had this sound playing of like nighttime animals and creatures, right? So there'd be an owl that would fly across and hoot, and you hear cricket and like the skittering of smaller rodent nighttime creatures, and that's like the ambient sounds that I went with. And I found this mysterious sound audio that I could put as music in the background. I could not recreate it with my voice, even if I tried. It was the perfect level of we don't know what's happening, but not on a creepy vibe. I don't know how familiar you are with music intonation and all of those things, but the intonation was not creep factor mystery. It was unsettling mystery. So it wasn't we can't do this because we know something's wrong. It was something might be wrong, but we know we have to do this. And I felt like that was one of the times that I've gotten a perfect harmony between sounds, music, description, and player reaction to all of it.
Yeah. It's always a good feeling when you get that, right? I use it. I try to use it to set a tone and to give the feel, right? And I think that is where good music comes in. Now, I've also played with people that are overstimulated by the music and they just they can't handle it, so I turn it off. But for the most part, I like to have something to keep them in the mood because it tends to keep people focused towards a specific point.
I think music, there are plenty of tools as a dungeon master that you can use to create ambience and to create environment for your players to be playing this game in. They can be visual tools. Roll20 is a good one. You guys are going to be using that in y'all's game today. If you're at home and you're in a home game, having a physical map drawn out. And if you've ever played anything that has terrain features like World of Warcraft, or not World of Warcraft, sorry, Warhammer. Like if you've played anything that has physical features and terrain and things like that on a table, you can use those things with your map and fill in. So I did this once. I was playing with somebody who had, it's not HeroClix, it's before HeroClix. It's older than HeroClix, but you have the little miniatures and it's like little hexes.
HeroScape.
Yeah.
HeroScape? I think it is HeroScape. Actually, HeroClix was
really?
before HeroScape.
Oh. Well, he played a lot of HeroScape, so he had a bunch of HeroScape parts. So what I would do is I would get on to this map and I would draw it out, and then I'd say, okay, here are my pieces that I have to work with, and I would build terrain for the table to actually walk through, and they can visually watch their character walking through this terrain. And I thought that was the coolest thing.
I wish that's something that we could do more on the digital space a little bit easier, is verticality and environments.
It's mostly top down.
Really hard to do. Yeah. There's something to be said about being in person and having something that has verticality and space. I love, for when I play in person, I've got terrain that I've built because I use the MDS foam, the installation foam, and I'll create tiles and things that I can move. And I found that verticality adds an aspect to it that makes it much more interesting instead of just having a flat piece.
I've used multiple different mediums to try and give the illusion of environment so that when they're watching the table, they can visualize themselves as the character walking through this environment. Some things didn't work out as well as others, mostly because they were 2-dimensional, not 3-dimensional. And one thing I found I really liked that was 2-dimensional is I had either bought or been gifted a set of 5x5 puzzle pieces. So, well, okay. That's wrong to say. They were 1x1 inch squares on these puzzle pieces. So, yeah.
Okay.
So you could fit the puzzle pieces together any way you wanted, and you could make an actual dungeon that way. So
Yeah,
instead of
that's cool.
drawing this dungeon out on a piece of paper, where it's like, oh, you have lines here and there, you can put one piece down. This is where you start. And they're
Mhm.
like, okay,
Yeah.
well, what do we see? And then they were dry erase puzzle pieces. So I would say, okay, well, here's a V right here. You see a path that way and a path that way. Okay, we're going to go this way. Cool. Drop down the next puzzle piece, right? This is your hallway. Drop down the next
Yeah.
puzzle piece. This is where the hallway goes. Drop down your next puzzle piece. This is the room that you have found at the end of this hallway.
Yeah.
And I've found it
Mhm.
incredible for fog of war type stuff.
Mhm.
Just being able to hold your
Yeah.
pieces and them not be able to see anything. And with electronics, and we have stuff now that there is legitimate black fog of war covering the map, and certain characters will have dark vision and be able to see larger portions of it. And I don't remember what it's called, but there is an app that, if it takes into account who does and who does not have dark vision, and it shows the people who are watching what they can see based on their character.
Dynamic
Yeah.
lighting. Roll20 does that. That's actually what I've been experimenting with the last couple of days. I couldn't quite get it the way I wanted to in time, but it's something I want to experiment with, right? But you can set, right, when you set who controls it
Mhm.
and they log in, they are going to see as if their character would see, whether their character has night vision or not, or a torch or whatever.
Now, as a GM, if I had infinite amounts of money and time to spend on creating maps, I would buy. Have you ever gone to like a planetarium? Have you
Yeah.
seen the sandbox that has a projection over it that registers the levels of the sandbox and it changes the color based on? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I would have something like
Yeah.
that on a table,
Yeah, that would be cool.
and I don't know. I think that would be really cool. I don't know exactly how I would make it work,
I
but
I've seen some things that are currently in development that allow you to see it from the inside
yeah,
perspective. And in which case, I think that's where a lot of these are going to end up going instead of your top down view, which is very nice. I think, getting that 3D aspects of it. I've always had the idea of an augmented reality, but then you're talking about everybody would have to have
yeah.
glasses and blah, 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 blah.
Again, infinite time,
But
infinite money.
some cool technologies. Yeah. Uh, they've got some cool technologies coming down the pipe that look really interesting to add that you typically only get at the
Yeah.
tabletop to virtual aspects as well.
So, but anyways, there are plenty of different mediums to involve the players and get them zeroed in and feel like they're in their environment. Music, I think, is at the top. Music is by far the number one
Yeah.
thing, in my opinion, that can set the
Yeah.
scene for the player.
It's a game that takes place largely in theater
Mhm.
of the mind. I usually only do maps for encounters. Occasionally a dungeon, right? Because dungeons can be a bit keeping track of all that in your own head can
Yeah.
be a bit of a pain. And so if there is like a maze-like dungeon or an encounter, then I'll typically do it. But for the most part, I like to do theater of the mind. And setting that stage in the theater of the mind, music is a huge
Yeah.
help to that. If I could spray scents into their rooms, I would do that
That
too.
would be an experience. Imagine they're going into
That would be an experience.
a bar,
It just smell rotting
or just like if
flesh.
they're going into a, even, I mean, yeah, but I think your brain went darker than mine, which I think we've established is your bread and butter at this point.
It's normal
But
for me. Yeah.
imagine they're like going into this dank bar on the side of the road that very clearly is meant to be a traveler waypoint. Nobody cares what they smell like when they're
Mhm.
there. Nobody cares if they spill beer on
Yeah.
themselves or on the tables or whatever.
Yeah.
And like people are always vomiting because they're drinking too much on the road and all this stuff. Imagine
Mhm.
pumping that smell to give that ambience into somebody's room. It would be like, uh, uh. Like
Yeah.
as a civilized society that we are today, loosely civilized, um, you don't get those smells in places. In the time period esque that most of these adventures are taking place in, which is a fantasy realm time period type thing. Think Lord of the Rings to know what I'm saying for the listeners. That time period, cleanliness was different. The smells that your body
Yeah.
elicited and that were around you was vastly different than modern hygiene So pumping those smells into a room for somebody, I think that
Yeah.
could be really hard to smell.
It's not a good idea. It was mostly a joke.
I think it's an incredible idea. I think it's amazing. I think it'd be hilarious once. It would be funny for
Yeah.
one session.
Yeah.
After that, everybody would be like, okay, we don't want that anymore.
Yeah. It's like the pizza controller that smells
Yeah.
like pizza that for Teenage Mutant Ninja
Yeah.
Turtles. Cool novelty item. Let's not do it all the time.
So I think we both are at the same answer as this on this last question. Would you recommend this game? And if so, to what style of gamers?
Yes to all styles.
Yeah.
That's the quick, easy answer. Look, just give it a try. I mean, there is somebody that you know or somebody that you can find who loves this game and is more than happy to introduce a new character to it.
Absolutely.
A new person to it, I should say.
And like, to expand on that, if you look up local game shop in your area,
Yep.
you will have multiple entries. You can check them out. All you have to do is walk in, ask the person at the counter, "Hey, do you guys host D&D night for new players?" Most of the time,
Well, and if
go
you're
ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. No,
Okay.
you finish.
Most of the time, even if they don't, what they'll tell you is not currently, but we have people who like to play here. We can ask them if you can join them for a session.
Right.
That is mostly what you'll find. And if you do find someone says, "Oh yeah, we have a rotating list of DMs that will come in this night every week and rotate tables, and every night's different." And that can be a good experience to get a lot of variety. You'll never play the same character twice for a while, but it allows you to understand and experience the game in its raw.
Right. Well, and I think too, if you're curious about it but you don't necessarily want to commit to playing it, Twitch, a Critical Role is a great one, right? Especially if you want something that you can get invested in that aspect. And so I would start there, right? It's a great way to kind of get introduced to some of the mechanics. You can watch it, you can get that kind of storytelling experience. And then also like Twitch, right? Because that is one way to play, right? You can also watch Twitch for other aspects. I mean, there are people that are playing D&D all the time. I play it on Fudge channel. We do it every week because he's GMing a game, I'm GMing a game. We do it every week. There are similar people doing that exact same thing all over the place, right? And it's a great way to get introduced to it, to see if it's something that you have any interest in.
Watching is definitely a way to gauge your interest levels. There's also avenues to play if you're worried about sitting with a group of people or sitting with a face cam or anything like that. With Discord, modern technologies, there are plenty of Discords out there that have sections for that. They have multiple DMs that will run games, and they have sections for preferred no camera. And so you can play in the anonymity of whatever name you decide to run with in that Discord, and you can gauge it that way. If you want to create a nickname for yourself on your account as soon as you log into that Discord, you can, and nobody will know who you are. Nobody will know how to find you outside of from in that specific name within that Discord. So you can very much so go anonymously, try it once. If you're like, that's not for me, you can just leave. You never have to go back.
Yeah. Yep.
So yes, we think you should try it. Everybody should try it once.
Yes.
If you are scared to try it, scared, or you have some kind of stigma against it or what have you, watching somebody else play is also a great option, or listening to someone else play. If you go through Spotify,
podcasts, I mean, everywhere.
Personally, I don't like listening as much as I like watching, but that's because I enjoy watching the people's faces and seeing their experience versus just listening to it.
I agree. I think there's an aspect of that that is very fun and very interesting, and you can get drawn in by a lot of people in that way.
But it also, and I think for me,
there's a context.
Yes. And when I started playing, I wanted to learn more. And if somebody suggested Critical Role to me, that was when they were still recording their first campaign. I think they were 30 episodes in or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I caught up to live in 3 weeks. Like,
yeah, I did the same thing.
And most of that was getting to watch them, like see the reactions, see the thought, right? Because if you just listen to it and you hear a long silence, you can go, okay, this is kind of boring. But when you're watching and you realize they're not silent, they are all deep in thought. Everyone is trying to figure out how their character would react, how they think of this is going. Everybody's just lost in thought.
Yeah, I think I started watching them at the Briarwood arc. So I had caught up, right? And then I caught up with them at the Briarwood arc.
That's roughly the same time I caught up.
Dude. Yeah, Critical Role is just great. The first campaign, the second campaign, I think they're getting ready to wrap up their third campaign. It is really, really good. And having said that, Dungeons and Dragons, not the only tabletop RPG out there. There are a lot of people using a lot of different systems, and all of them have value. And so if you're not into the sword and sorcery, even though, I mean, honestly, D&D is kind of a really good engine because you can use it in so many different contexts and ways, right? They have Spelljammer, which is like, Spelljammer is interesting. It is space fantasy, is kind of what it is. Talking hippo people, monkey people.
As far as video games,
all flying
Destiny,
in
ships. If it was played as a tabletop, would be considered space Spelljammer.
Spelljammer? Okay, I could see that. Yeah. But there are a ton of different systems that can fit with anything that you want. I think Dungeons and Dragons will also always hold a special place in my heart. I feel like it's one of the easier ones to understand. But it's also a great way to get in and start playing around with some of these other tabletop RPGs.
Yeah. And to bounce off of what you said of it being very malleable and can fit a lot of different things. In Critical Role, their first campaign, one of the characters creates guns. And there are consequences to that you learn later in the campaign. And
up into campaign 3,
there's just consequences. And he introduced that to Matt Mercer's world, and he has played all of their mainstay campaigns out of that same world, just at different times and different locations. And there have been consequences from that decision to say, okay, you can make guns. The consequences are still following the group around, even though it's not the same group anymore. And that's awesome, in my opinion. But
it is really cool. I'm excited to see what they're going to do with campaign 3.
Have you not watched it yet?
I've watched campaign 3. I am catching up. I am super behind on where they're at with campaign 3. I think I am in last year's episodes.
I watched
they're on
first 3 live episodes that they did, and then life got busy and I couldn't dedicate time to sit down for 4 hours every Thursday night to watch.
Yeah. They are currently on the moon where I'm at.
Okay.
I kept it as spoiler-free as I could.
Yeah. But I have a personal story as well. That was just a easy, you can go find this somewhere to know what I'm talking about. We ran a game that was base rules of D&D, but was futurized. So mechs were a thing, guns were a thing, Warforged were significantly
more prevalent.
And it was, some of the rules were loosely based off of, what's the game? I'm drawing a blank. There's a game recently where people add parts to their bodies.
Armored Core?
It was a very big AAA game that people were really excited for and upset about. Cyberpunk. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Cyberpunk. It was kind of where we took that game. So you could get implants, you could get parts of your body changed out, and
FUD did a similar game that they streamed as well.
All of this was just stuff that the DM said they changed the skin, essentially, right? So a sword
Yeah.
was now a laser sword, or for a Warforged, it was
Sure.
attached inside of your body, so your arm would change into a sword, right? Certain weapons like guns were in the place of crossbows, things like that. It is just a reskin of how the base game is written, but it's all the exact same rules.
Yeah.
So the game is very malleable to whatever suits your fancy, or in some
Yeah,
cases
and that's
suits your
the
fantasy.
great thing.
Uh-huh.
I think that's the great thing about it, right? Is the ability to fit whatever need
Yeah.
you have for it and tell whatever story that you as a table want to tell.
Well, we could go on and on and on and
Yes.
on about D&D,
And
but
on.
we have already taken a long time for this podcast, and I'm sure everybody is wondering when we are going to shut up. So I'm going to say right now is when we're going to shut up, and we will move on to the rest of the show. We don't have any news and updates. Most of the time, we pull our news and updates from our gaming news channel. We have multiple other Discords used for making announcements piped into that. One of them is the Pocket Pair Discord for Power World. We also have the Marvel Rivals Discord. All of their announcements and things get piped into the topic board there. We have PlayStation. I think we had Xbox or EA or something at one point, but they've since stopped working. So that's where we normally pull our news and updates, is from our gaming news section. So if you guys have anything you wanted to look at, we may have it, we may not. If you have a suggestion for a channel that you think we should add into that, let us know. Let us know in feedback. If you're in our Discord, put it in general and tag the moderators. Whatever way you think is a good way to get that information to us that you think you should have in the Discord, let us know. We will try and get that piped in for you guys. There was some news and updates surrounding Marvel Rivals, but most of it was talking about their Twitch drops and talking about new things that they're working on. But a lot of it, by the time this recording is released, will have already been over. So that is why I'm not mentioning it, because I
That's
don't want to
always
hurt
fun.
everybody's
Yeah.
feelings of saying, oh, that happened a week and a half ago. Thank you for letting us know. So,
Right.
anyways, questions for the show. Our good friend OG Noob for Life, aka Hot Death, and the winner of the Astronaut Arcade controller, has been so kind as to fill up our questions for the show. So we're going to not do one of his, we're going to do somebody else's. Love you, Hot Death. Thank you very much, buddy. So we're going to go with HD Tech's question this week. He says, all right, I got a question for y'all. What is the proper way to eat a Twix? Let me put it into context. My wife will eat the caramel off first, then the cookie part, but I feel that ruins the experience separating them. What is your opinion?
You want to go first, or
Go
you want
for
me
it,
to go
Russ.
first?
Guest privileges, you get to go first.
I mean, I go straight in, and sometimes it's not even differentiated between. I got very tired of the left or right argument. So I decided that I would just start going in and eating both at the same time. They're narrow enough, you can just. It's my favorite way to eat a Twix. Twix. Not Twixt. There's no T at the end.
I don't really eat Twix. If it's given to me at Halloween, or if it's put in my kid's bucket at Halloween, I'll eat it. But those are individual tiny bars. So I just pop the whole thing in my
Sure.
mouth. Yeah, just
The whole thing. Just...
throw it in there, chew it up. Good stuff.
I will actually say, so that I think might be my favorite way to eat them, is just the bite size. Although, have you ever tried freezing a
Yes,
Twix?
frozen chocolate is of any kind. Reese's, Twix, Three Musketeer,
It's good stuff.
Payday, good bar, any and all.
My favorite is
Yeah.
Reese's. Some Reese's, like the
Mhm.
little bite-sized ones. You got to unwrap them first, because I hate having to just. I just want to grab a handful and throw them into my gullet.
So, but frozen chocolate is the bane of my existence. If somebody says, "Hey, I have chocolate," I'm like, that's okay. I don't need any. If somebody says, "Hey, I have frozen chocolate," where? Which specific section of your freezer can I find it so that I can go take?
Dude, one of my favorite things is frozen Nutty Buddies.
We're gonna have to have some kind of something to deal with the ways we eat candy, because That's almost an entire episode show topic in and of itself.
Yeah. You got me started. I do think your wife is eating it wrong, though. To answer the question, which I feel like is what you wanted to ask, is my wife doing
Yes.
it wrong? The answer is yes.
Yes.
She is doing
You do
it.
not break apart. That's like freezing a Reese's, cutting all of the chocolate off of it, and eating the peanut butter first, and then the chocolate.
It's weird. Like, why would you eat it separately? What point is there to that? Other than
anarchy.
Not there's oversimplifying and over. Is there a counterpart to that? Oversimplifying, over complicating, or overcomplicating something that should be simple, sweet, indulgent.
But to each their own. If she enjoys it that way, I don't think you should tell her to stop. But also, she's wrong, and you can tell her we said so.
Yeah, just don't know.
Our astronaut of the week this week is somebody who is actually gotten around quite a bit. MohawkAngel.
Hey.
MohawkAngel. She is in quite a few of the different Discords. I believe our good friend PP Pipe got Mohawk into this Discord, but Mohawk's pretty cool. They're just good to talk to. They're not very active in this Discord, but in the Discords I have seen them in or heard them on shows or things like that. They're pretty cool. Our streamer of the week.
I mean, the name is pretty cool.
I think she was on GDC, PP Pipe, actually. I think.
I'm sorry. My son is over here, and he's got his forehead pressed against the floor. He's just crawling backwards, scooting his forehead across the floor, and just like tracking around. It's really funny.
It seems like it's hard to maintain focus on anything else at that point.
Yeah.
Our streamer of the week is Astacross. For any of you who have played Destiny 2.
Oh, yeah.
And Russ is lying to all of you right now where he says, oh, yeah, I know who that is. He doesn't.
What I mean is, the name is familiar because you mentioned it literally at the beginning of the show. So I'm like, oh, that's why you were talking about that person.
Okay. Cool.
No, I have no idea who it is. But I'm sure that your stream is great, and maybe one day I'll watch it. I love you.
Astacross was a big name for Destiny 2. He was one of the go-tos for guides and for weapon specs that you would want to hunt for. He was very big in Destiny 2. Mm-hmm. He also just recently started playing Marvel Rivals. He is streaming that. And I like his streams. I like his work. I think you guys can go and check him out. And if you enjoy it, give him a follow. He is one of those, I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe he is a professional streamer and he actually gets paid to do that. So his stuff,
cool.
Yeah.
Good job,
I enjoy his content. I think you guys will enjoy it too. Go check him out. Russ, Mr. Jackel 7250. Where can the people find you outside of these last two episodes that you've been on?
You can find me typically over with FUD on Elmer FUD Games. We do a good bit of stuff together. Tonight, you can find me on his channel at 8 Central, where we will be diving into the Dungeons of Dragons. And if you like a horror campaign, come and join us. We got some new players who are just figuring things out for the first time, so it's going to be a good time. You can also find me on his channel Fridays at 7 Central, where we play a campaign with Native Raider, Sweaty Spooks, and Bill Nye's Bowtie. And that's a good time as well. Currently, we just faced a Hawktra, a goose of 1,000 heads, a Galuceraptor, if you will, and that has been a really good time. And you can find me, of course, on Discord, jackel7250. I'm around. I am not very good at checking Discord, so I may or may not.
I'm watching.
But I promise the thought is there. Yeah. He's very distracting.
He decided that the katana sleeves looked like a snack for a second.
Well, this is actually a printer cartridge, so probably not a good thing for him to be.
Probably not. You guys can find me, as I'm sure you guys are aware because I say it every week, right here in the Astronaut Arcade podcast, the Astronaut Arcade podcast Discord. You can find me in the Power World podcast and the Power World podcast Discord. You can find me in HD Text Discord. You can find me in Dizzy Gaming Discord. You can find me in Fud's Discord, which is currently the Fud Beef, Elmer Beef Games.
Yeah. Oh, is it really? I didn't
currently
even
Elmer Beef
notice that.
Games. You can also find me in the Space Mafia Discord. You can find me on an episode of Dudes Playing Stuff, which is their podcast that they run over there. You can find me in the Blueberry Lounge Discord and on an episode of their podcast. You can also find me sometimes, not always, probably never on Twitch. I should get better about doing that, but usually
who's got time for that? I mean,
well,
honestly.
usually I have time and I choose to game with my friends, and because not everybody wants to be on a stream. Not everybody wants their voice out there like that, so I choose to just game with my friends instead. But those are the places you guys can find me. Thank you guys for coming to listen to another episode of the Astronaut Arcade. I know this one was a little bit different, and when we started this, yes, we are 95, right at this point 99% about video games, but we love all games, and we want to bring some other things to you guys. So I was thinking about taking a break from video games this week and next week to do D&D and possibly Magic the Gathering, if Russ would be so kind to join me next week as well, because I know that he is a very big MTG player.
I would say I'm more casual than big, but that's specifically because I don't get super into it, but I do love playing it, and yes, I would absolutely be.
All right. So, again, thank you all for listening for the Astronaut Arcade podcast, where we take one small step for man and a giant leap for gamerkind. And Pluto is most definitely a planet.